you ready?
Hello and welcome to our Charter Road Hospitality Studios here at the Hampton Inn in Oxford. This is Hotty Toddy Hotline. We open up this week's show with some tragic news. Last week, Ole Miss volleyball player and track and field athlete Ty Laporte died in a car accident near Holly Springs late in the night on Thursday. The 23-year-old finished her Rebel volleyball career last fall, ranked third all-time in blocks, assists, and third all-time in total blocks. Laporte was set to complete in her final track and field season this spring, where she ranks 9th in school history in the outdoor high jump. We want to send our thoughts and prayers out to Ty's family and the Ole Miss community. You can donate to the Ty Laporte Memorial Fund at give2athletics.com/Ty Laporte Memorial Fund. We will miss Ty Laporte, as she was a very great student athlete at Ole Miss. And on this week's show, we're joined by Steve Vassallo of HottyToddy.com. Steve, how you doing?
Great. Browning had a great weekend watching golf at Pebble Beach.
Beautiful.
Not there, though, but on the airways.
Well, we're going to talk a lot of Ole Miss sports. Got some basketball to get to, some spring baseball, and Steve is going to share some of the recent articles he's written about recruiting and other things. So stick with us. We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline with Steve Vassallo of HottyToddy.com. All right, Steve. Well, it's great to have you on the show this week, and you kind of came back to Oxford, and there's some rain this week. I bet you missed Pebble Beach.
Well, it's always great to be in Oxford. There's never not a pretty or beautiful day to be here in Lafayette County.
Absolutely. Now, you did write a piece on recruiting and how National Signing Day ended. You write for HottyToddy.com. So overall, I mean, what were your thoughts on Ole Miss's signing?
Well, I've been following Ole Miss sports for many, many decades, and I can honestly say, Browning, that this was undoubtedly the best recruiting class Ole Miss has ever seen. And I think the numbers back that up. In the three major polling services, we were 4th, 5th, and 6th. And when you reach that level in national recruiting, it's very subjective at that point. What's the difference between 4th and 1st? But I have a little bit different spin on recruiting. I would never rate a team in the top 3 that did not have an outstanding quarterback. We do have probably the most outstanding quarterback in the United States in Shea Patterson, and I think a team that doesn't recruit an outstanding quarterback like a Patterson, to me it's hard to justify that team being in the top 3. I don't care who it is, Alabama concluded, or Michigan, or Ohio State, because those of us who follow football as you do, you can have the greatest defensive team in the world, you can have the best running backs and offensive line, but unless you've got the quarterback to go with that team, you're going to be marginal at best, or above average, but you're never going to be great if you don't have a great quarterback. So I think the fact that we do have a great quarterback in this class says volumes about this class.
Ole Miss did have 2 quarterbacks that decided to leave the program. Devontae Kincaid transferred to Graham Lake State. Ryan Buchanan decided to retire from football. So then, the question was, Steve, would Ole Miss let Shea Patterson redshirt? That was a question, about a couple months ago. But now with two quarterbacks gone off the roster, I mean, it's safe to say that he will be the backup quarterback going into next season.
Well, I think that the jury's still out on that. Now, we have another quarterback in the mix from Louisiana who didn't play last year. I believe he was redshirted. So I don't know that I would really hate to see Patterson lose a year of eligibility and not be redshirted. It may come to that, but I'd love to see him get a year under his belt learning the system. And let's hope no injuries happen to Chad Kelly, that he can go the distance, because I think Chad Kelly could establish himself this year as the possibly the greatest quarterback in Ole Miss history with a follow-up season like he had this year.
Yeah, and he's I've checked the Las Vegas bets for the Heisman Trophy next year, and Chad Kelly is right up there in the top 5.
Well, he should be, and that on his resume, that MVP from the Sugar Bowl certainly didn't hurt. But what I like most about Chad Kelly is that he's so exciting to watch. He can run the football, he can throw it from anywhere, and none of us will ever forget the completion against Alabama last year that I think Quincy picked off and ran for a touchdown. That's probably one of the most exciting and interesting plays we've ever seen in a major college football game. And Chad Kelly made the toss. So I think Chad is going to have a banner season, and I'm so thankful that he did not go into the pro draft.
And last week, the Associated Press reported that the 13 allegations against Ole Miss football, and 9 of those were against Hugh Freeze. Some of those had to do with the Laramie Tunsil situation. But, overall, it really didn't affect signing day. And, just looking down the road, I don't see a postseason ban, but maybe a couple scholarships. What do you see from these allegations?
Well, what I'm hearing, there's more smoke than fire, and anybody who follows this program very closely, and I know a lot of people who follow it much more closely than I do, have told me that Hugh Freeze plays right by the book, 180 degrees. He doesn't vary, and there's nothing that I think that's out there that's going to cause us any concern whatsoever. Now, having said that, the fact that this story was leaked the weekend before recruiting signing day on Wednesday, I thought was I don't believe in coincidences, so I thought that was quite interesting, the timing of it.
Fishy.
But I don't think we have any concerns at all other than a mild wrist slap.
Let's hope that's the case. Staying with the football conversation, next season, Alabama, they look to be another strong team, the SEC West. But Ole Miss, they do get Bama at home. I'm assuming you put Alabama, Ole Miss as the top 2, maybe LSU third. But, with Chad Kelly, this being his senior year, and some other, players back, is Ole Miss the favorites to win the West?
Well, I think they are, and I think they should be the clear favorite. The fact that we're playing Alabama here in Oxford, and Alabama's got some quarterback issues. They're going to have to surface a new quarterback. They lost some key players in graduation. We did too, but we've got a great nucleus coming back. I've been analyzing our schedule for days, if not weeks already, and I think most people agree with me. Probably the 3 to 4 toughest games we're going to have this year. I honestly believe that the most difficult game is going to be the opening game against Florida State. I think they're a sound team in every area, and I think that could not be a better starting game for us, because I believe every team we play following Florida State is going to be weaker. I think Alabama, of course, even though it's here, it's going to be a tough game. And probably the toughest SEC game for us this year is going to be LSU, because it's in Baton Rouge. We also have to play Texas A&M on the road. That's never easy. We've got to play Arkansas on the road, which is not easy. But we've got Auburn here. We've got Georgia here. We've got the Egg Bowl here. So the schedule pretty much lines up for the Rebels this year. And I believe that this is a team, if we can get by Florida State, we may be looking at a Final Four.
And we don't know what the top 25 will be going into next season. But the first 4 games, you said at Florida State, then you got to tune up against Wofford, than Alabama and Georgia on back-to-back
Right.
weekends. That's kind of scary.
Well, it is. Georgia's bringing in a new head coach. I think Kirby Smart's the new head coach there, and I think we're catching them at a good time. Of course, Alabama's going to be loaded for bear. Alabama does not like to lose to a team 3 years in a row, especially one in their own division. The thing about playing Alabama so early, whoever loses that game is at a huge disadvantage as far as the West, because the winning team then has to lose twice. So if we can beat Alabama, and I think we'll be favored, I really do. If we can beat Alabama, then we would have to lose 2 SEC games with them going undefeated the rest of the way. Friends of mine tell me this is the year Alabama's going to fall to Tennessee. It hadn't happened in a few years, but Tennessee's getting better, as we know. This could be the year that possibly happens.
Yeah, to Tennessee, that they've had some heartbreak against Alabama. I believe they had a lead with about 4 minutes left in the game this past year. And then I remember, was it back when Lane Kiffin was the coach at Tennessee, Alabama blocked a field goal from Tennessee that would have won the game for the Vols.
That's true. But looking at this Ole Miss schedule again, I like the fact the Egg Bowl is here. That's a game we probably don't have to worry about this year. You always have to be concerned about Mississippi State, but when it's here and when you've got a quarterback season like we do in Chad Kelly, it's really hard to see Ole Miss not winning that game. But that game's so late in the year. One of the more interesting games, Browning, on the schedule, I can't remember in my lifetime when we played Vanderbilt in late November.
Right.
So I don't know. I think that will be another positive for Ole Miss, because when Vanderbilt gives you problems, it's normally early in the season, and the reason they don't have the depth that most of the teams in the SEC have. So if you get them late, by the time we play them on November 19th, you may think, well, if injuries are normal for most teams, it might be a huge advantage. That game's in Nashville, but we have a huge following with our alumni base in Nashville, where I happen to be from. So I'm looking forward to that game late in the year.
Yeah, and then we're used to seeing Arkansas in November, but now we will see them October 15th of next season. All right, well, we're going to take a break on Hotty Toddy Hotline, but coming up, Steve was at both Ole Miss basketball games last week in Gainesville, and then last Saturday against Arkansas. So we're going to break down Ole Miss hoops, and we'll talk just about if they have any chance at making it to March Madness. They have a lot of work to do, but we'll talk about all that when Hotty Toddy Hotline returns. Welcome back at the Hotty Toddy Hotline. Our special guest this week is Steve Vassallo of HottyToddy.com. Steve, you're a road trip warrior. You went to Gainesville last week to watch Ole Miss play Florida, and talk about your experience there. We were hoping Ole Miss would get that win with Sebastian Saly's back, but I went to the game last year in the Swamp. I think Florida's got a beautiful campus. Haven't been in their basketball arena, but talk about your experience.
Well, Browning, it was a great experience. I love following Ole Miss basketball, especially on the road. And I try to go to at least one away game a year, if not two. I'm so thankful I went this year, because this is the last season for the Florida Fieldhouse. They're going to tear it down at the end of the season and then build a new Fieldhouse right on the same site. So this one was built, I believe, around 1981, 1980, so it's been there a while. I think Bob Wetlich was the coach here when that gym opened. But I really enjoyed going down there for a number of reasons. Ole Miss is playing a lot better basketball right now than at any point in the season. We're healthier than we have been. We've won 3 out of our last 4 games. That game at Gainesville went to the final 2 minutes, and anybody could have won that game. What happened there at the end, Stephon Moody fouled out, I think with around a minute and a half, something like that, to go. And when that happened, it really put us in a bind. But we played very well. And, of course, the second half, Saturday against Arkansas here in Oxford, our defense just totally shut down the Hogs in that second half. So I believe this team is playing very well now. We've got some interesting games coming up. Only 2 more home games this year, Missouri and Mississippi State. I expect we'll win both of those games. I think we've got Auburn on the road, which is to be another winnable game. And then if we could squeeze one more out, I believe that'll give us 20 wins. So going into Nashville, I think we would be a team you would not want to play in the tournament this year.
And, yeah, Ole Miss did fall to Florida 77-72. Moody was in foul trouble. I mean, that was a hard game. Florida is a lot better this season. I mean, I've seen them projected as a 6 or 7 seed in the NCAA tournament. But you're right, they rebounded on Saturday against Arkansas. And it was really interesting, Steve, because Stephon Moody, only 1 point in the first half, didn't even make a basket. But his other guys, they stepped up. Tomas Giello scored 15 points. Marcanvis Hyman had a double-double, 11 points, 10 rebounds. And then Sebastian Saiz scored 11 points. And really just an overall great team effort from Ole Miss. Moody did have 16 points in the second half. But, I mean, I think it says a lot. When everyone steps up, when Moody is down, then I think you got a pretty good team.
Well, we do, and you mentioned most of the guys, and Perez played some quality minutes too. I think in following Andy Kennedy since he's been here at Ole Miss, Andy is just such a great basketball coach. He gets the maximum potential out of his team year after year after year, and he's doing it again this year. And I wouldn't have any coach in the country on the sidelines in the final 2 or 3 minutes of a game than Andy Kennedy. Andy's going to find a way to win if it's humanly possible, but he just gets the most out of his players. And the fact Saiz is back now contributing both scoring and rebounding is giving this team a shot in the arm. And Moody, what more can you say about this kid? I think he went 0 for 8 against Arkansas, and most people at that point would have just hung it up. He didn't. As you mentioned, he came back with a strong double-figure game. And he just exerts so much energy on the court. I love when he's cold from the outside, he'll drive to the basket and either pick up a foul or get a layup. So he's going to be a force in the playoffs for us, no doubt about it.
We're going to break down the schedule in our next segment, but for the last couple minutes on our segment right now, the Pavilion Open, I always love talking to people about it. You've been around Ole Miss your whole life. It's kind of crazy. You go from the tap pad to this new arena, the Pavilion, in one day essentially, and it's beautiful. Tell me your thoughts about it.
Well, you can't say enough nice things about the Pavilion. My brother and I announced the first 2 years the tap pad was open on the radio, Ole Miss basketball over WCBH. So I've been around the Ole Miss program a long time, and can I share a story? Do we have time to share a quick story? One of the highlights of my Ole Miss announcing career, we played Kentucky in that first 65-66 season, and Adolph Rupp was the coach of Kentucky at that time, and they had just beaten us. I think it was around 50 or 55 points. And my brother and I interviewed Coach Rupp after the game, get his thoughts on the game, and I'll never forget this. He was complaining about 2 or 3 errant passes from his point guard, Tommy Cron, and he made the comment, he said, if my point guard keeps throwing the ball away like he did tonight, we'll never win the national championship. He could have cared less about the difference in the game, but that's how technical he was in basketball proficiency. And but anyway, they went on and went to the finals that year. I think Texas Western El Paso beat them in the final game of the national title, but they gave it a run. Yeah,
I mean, he had some great players. Pat Riley, I believe,
was on that team. Larry Conley, Louis Dampier, and I think the other guy was Thad Jarris. But they were great shooters. That was long before the three-point shot.
Yeah, that's very cool. You got to cover Adolph Rupp, and I'm sure you saw some games with John Calipari. When he's been at Kentucky. I'm from Memphis, so I'm used to Calipari. I was a huge Tigers fan when he was the coach, and now the program is really struggling under Josh Pastner, unfortunately. But, all right, in our next segment, Steve and I, we're going to talk about what's next for the Ole Miss basketball team. They got a couple big road games this week, Texas A&M and Auburn, like you mentioned. And then we're going to see if this team has any life left to make the NCAA tournament. 0 RPI top 50 wins. They should have had that South Carolina one, but hopefully they'll rally down the stretch and get some big wins with 6 games remaining on their SEC schedule. Hotty Toddy Hotline. We'll be right back after this break.
Hey, Rebels, your truck is here. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford presents the all-new Ram Rebel. It's Ram, the Rebel way. Send an unmistakable signal. Rebel, 24/7. Ram Rebel, from your friend in the car business. Allen Samuels Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Oxford.
Come by, let's be friends.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline. All right, let's talk some Ole Miss basketball with all of you. The Rebels, of course, split last week, 1-1, losing to Florida 77-72, and beating Arkansas 76-60. You know, Steve, a couple weeks ago, we're talking about Texas A&M, the team that's atop the SEC, ahead of Kentucky, ahead of LSU. Now that they'd lost 4 games in a row. They dropped out of the AP Top 25. They're 18-7. They're still ranked 24th in the coaches poll, but they're a team that's really struggling, and they're going to be eager. They're returning home, and Ole Miss, they have not done well on the road at all this season. I mean, when we look at Ole Miss's road schedule in the SEC, they have only won one game. That was at Missouri against a team that's not even eligible to make the NCAA tournament because of the violations. But A&M. They are a overall very strong team. I mean, they have lost 4 games in a row, but their RPI ranked is 26, so that's a win you got to have. So Ole Miss, everyone's healthy. We had Moody had a hamstring injury. Giello's shoulder was hurting at one point. Saez, his eye, same with Martavius Newby. So how do you see the Rebels matching up against the number 24 Aggies?
Browning, I think of the remaining games prior to the tournament, this by far is going to be the most difficult, make no mistake. And as you pointed out, winning on the road in the SEC is never easy. I don't care who you're playing. It's never easy. But if we can get past this game, I think we'll run the table. Momentum right now is on our side. It's not on the side of Texas A&M. The fact that we came so close the other night in Gainesville, there were a lot of bright things you could take away from that game, and I think we did take away some very positive things from that game. So I think this is going to be a dogfight, no pun intended, down there in Aggie land. And if we can get by that game, I believe we'll beat Auburn on the road, and then I feel certain we're going to win the next 2 games at home. So this is our toughest game, and I think let's put on our Pollyanna hat for a minute. If we could win all 4 of these games and then win at least 2 games in Nashville, this team I think has a chance to go to the NCAA. But I believe we're gonna have to really get hot now when it counts. Going to the NIT is, I would think right now, is almost a certainty.
Yeah, and 6 games left, like you said. I think at worst they got to go 5-1. I mean, and if you're going to lose one of the 6, I would say it's Texas A&M, just because their RPI is 25. But you do have a team in Georgia. You got to play on the road. Their RPI is 66. It'd be great to have another win against them. Ole Miss, their RPI is 85. 0 top 50 wins on their resume. So they really gotta get going here in these next 6. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you. If they could finish 5-1, win 1 or 2 in the conference tournament, I think they got to be in. Because I mean that would be, I mean, right now, Steve, in the SEC, they're 6-6. So if they finish, 11-7 in the conference, pick up 2 more wins in Nashville, that's a good record. That's 13-8.
13 conference victories. That's huge.
Yeah, and usually, no matter if you're the ACC, Big 10, Big 12, Pac-12, whatever, if you're at 13, you got a strong case to make the tournament. And then, honestly, I feel bad for these other schools, but what might help Ole Miss get into this year's tournament if they, like we say, finish 5-1, take care of business in Nashville, is teams like SMU, Louisville, who got the postseason been taken away from them. And so that opens up 2 extra spots because, I mean, we look at the polls, SMU and Louisville are still ranked teams. So I think it's huge that they'll be out, because that could open up a spot for Ole Miss.
Well, I agree, and I think Moody is one of the most exciting players in the country this year, if not the most exciting player, and I certainly think that helps our resume a lot with him on the team and doing so well. But I totally agree with you. 5-1, I think, plus 2 wins in Nashville. It'd be hard to bet against Ole Miss at that point.
Yes, Stephon Moody ranks 8th in the country, 23 points per game. The leading scorer is James Daniel, who plays for Howard Bison, and then, of course, the stud from Oklahoma, Buddy Hield, 25.6 points per game. You know, when we look at college basketball, I think this is the first year in a while where we can say there's not just one or two great elite teams. There's just a lot of good teams, and March Madness, you know, could be really unpredictable, because, I mean, we've seen in the past teams like VCU and Wichita State where they were like 8 seeds and they sneak up and they make the tournament. But, I mean, in my opinion, I don't see a team that's just dominant like we saw like with Kentucky or Duke last season. But you might have a different opinion.
No, I don't. I totally concur with that. And I think you're right. We've got a lot of mediocrity this year in college basketball. And I think it's the table is set for us if we can just not stumble down at Texas A&M and come through there with a victory. I think we're off to the races. But again, I just can't say enough about Andy Kennedy and what a great job he does bringing his teams along. It seems like Andy's teams always peak at the right time, and I see that happening now. And, you know, you hate to see us lose ever, but when I left the gym the other night in Gainesville, I was not disappointed. I knew it was going to be tough for us to win there, but playing so close and with a chance to win that game with under 2 minutes, that says volumes about this Ole Miss basketball team. They will not quit.
Yeah, and you talk about Andy Kennedy, this brings up another question. You know, he was the coach in the TAPAD for a very long time. Obviously hard to bring recruits there with the facilities, but now, you know, you're in a new arena, state-of-the-art, $96 million. Is he would you say he's on the clock as far as his future? Because I don't see an excuse for him not being able to recruit now.
I think Andy is going to do real well in recruiting, especially with this facility. I'm very hopeful and optimistic that Andy will want to retire at Ole Miss. I think, I know he's the best basketball coach we've ever had here, the winningest coach. And the fans really, they love Andy Kennedy. I think that's why we have such a great student turnout and the enthusiasm. But he will be able to recruit here. And, you know, getting back to the TADPAD, that is still dear to my heart. But can you name another gymnasium in the United States in basketball that had a rain delay? I mean, that's sad that we went through that. But
yeah.
The TADPAD, was 50 years old. It needed to be replaced. And now we've got such a beautiful place to bring athletes, and we've got the indoor practice facility. So our facilities are second to none, and I think you'll see a big difference in recruiting. I think there were a couple of key recruits at the game the other day. I heard they're watching the Arkansas game, and I think Andy is going to continue to do well in anything he does. I just think that he'll shine in the future, as he already has at Ole Miss.
Yeah, and you're talking about some of the beautiful things at the pavilion, the Steak and Shake, which I talked to their manager. It's only the second Steak and Shake in the whole country inside an arena.
Interesting.
The first one is at Western Kentucky's basketball gymnasium over there in Kentucky. But yeah, it's interesting. It's the second franchise to be in an arena in the country.
The first Steak and Shake I ever encountered was in Daytona Beach. High school days, we used to go to Daytona in the summer, and there was one real close to the boardwalk. That's the first one I had ever seen or been able to eat at, and now we've got one right here inside the pavilion. It's incredible.
If I can give my honest opinion, I tried it, Arkansas game for the first time. Thought the burgers were great, fries were nice and hot, they were good. The shakes, though, I saw what they were doing. They make a whole bunch of shakes at once, but then they stick them inside a freezer, and like halfway through your drink, it's pretty good. But once you get to the bottom, it's a little icy. So they might want to improve on that, because when you go to a real Steak and Shake, they had the shake in the glass and everything, so it's nice and fresh. But overall, it's a really good experience. Steak and Shake. I got to try Cane's chicken and then the Old Venice pizza as well. All right, well, that wraps up that segment. We're going to get to some spring baseball. Baseball starts next weekend. We'll be right back on Hotty Toddy Hotline. Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline with Steve Vassallo of HottyToddy.com. All right, Steve, Ole Miss baseball. Finally get to see the Diamond Rebs. They're back next weekend, as they will have a 3-game series against Florida International starting this Friday the 19th at 4 o'clock. Saturday's game is at 1:30, and Sunday's game is at noon. Well, this team, they made the NCAA tournament last year, but they traveled to California and got swept out there, unfortunately. But now they return this season with some interesting prospects. The shortstop, Earl Robinson, was named a preseason All-American. Of course, they get pitcher Sean Johnson back, who underwent Tommy John surgery. Pitcher Brady Bramlett, he returns for the Rebels. So a lot of talent. Some young prospects, Holt Perdzak and Colby Bortles as well. So we're looking at a really interesting team, Steve, and they'll have their media day coming up in the middle of this week. But overall, I mean, this is a team that seems to always be in the hunt when we get towards May.
Well, I agree, and I think this year Browning will be no exception. I think most of the fans, including me, are so excited about all the incoming pitchers. And as you know, as great a hitting teams as you can have, when it gets down to the finals in the NCAA tournament and the SEC tournament, pitching prevails. And I think Coach Bianco has done a great service to this team, bringing in all this pitching. And, of course, most of our position players, fortunately, are coming back. You mentioned our shortstop, who's going to be one of the great players in college baseball this year. So this is going to be an exciting year for Ole Miss. And if one or two of these new pitchers really are stars like we believe they will be, there's no telling where this team can go. I think it was a few years ago, Vanderbilt was just overly loaded with pitching, and it really took that team a long, long way in their bid that year. And I see Ole Miss kind of lining up that way. You mentioned Tommy John. It kind of made me smile. About 10 years ago, I was at the New York Yankees fantasy camp, and we all got one at bat, the campers, and he was pitching when I came to the plate for my bat, and I'll never forget, I fouled off 3 or 4 pitches, and these guys weren't lobbing the ball in. They were throwing it pretty good, and I got a line drive single over the head of Bucky Dent. I'll never forget that. That was my last at bat ever in baseball. So you mentioned the name Tommy John. He was still going strong at the Yankee fantasy camp 10 years ago.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Yankees. Didn't Jake Gibbs play for the Yankees?
Jake Gibbs was a great catcher for the Yankees. I'm telling you right, Jake was replaced by Thurman Munson, and Jake came along when Elston Howard was still there and Yogi, and Jake filled that void of Yogi and Elston until Munson showed up in 1970. I think Thurman was Rookie of the Year in 1970, but Jake. Speaking of Jake, I'm so excited. Next October, we're going to have the dedication of the Jake Gibbs Letter Winners Walk here at Ole Miss. That's going to probably be one of the more exciting sporting events we've ever had on this campus, where every athlete who ever lettered, their name will be on that walkway in the Jake Gibbs Letter Winners Walk. Tentatively, it's supposed to open in October. Hopefully they'll meet that timeline, but whenever it opens, it's going to be exciting.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I love it when Ole Miss athletics they honor their former athletes. Like they're doing with Jake Gibbs. While we're talking baseball, of course, a controversial issue around the country is steroids and players not getting in the Hall of Fame because of taking steroids. I do want to get your opinion on that. As far as Pete Rose, I think he should get in the Hall of Fame because it's not like he bet his team to lose. He always bet his team to win. I'm glad he's getting inducted into the Reds Hall of Fame, but I kind of wish I wish the MLB would let him in at some point. As far as steroid users, that's kind of a 50-50 call because at the time, in the 80s and the 90s, it wasn't against the rules, I believe. So I don't know if you put him in the Hall of Fame with an asterisk or not. But I feel like it's going to be hard. We're looking 50 years from now, and like guys like Barry Bonds and Alex Rodriguez aren't in the Hall of Fame. So what's your opinion on these players that took steroids?
Well, I have real mixed emotions about it because the players like in my era when I was growing up, like Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris and Hank Aaron, those guys never took any kind of stimulant. I've been an A-Rod fan for years and years. He's hit more home runs for the Yankees, I think, than any other player other than Ruth. And I really would like to see Alex get into the Hall of Fame. It'd be unfortunate if that keeps him out. But that is an issue. Getting back to Pete Rose, though, I totally agree with you. I think Pete deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I think he's paid his price for betting, even though, like you said, it was for the Reds instead of against them. And Pete was just such an incredible baseball player, and he hustled every game, every at bat, and I think that needs to happen. I think he's paid his price. As far as the stimulants go, and those who took steroids, I think the jury is still out on that. You wonder, though, what the players from the 60s and 70s and even earlier who didn't participate in that kind of activity, what their thoughts are about these more modern-day players. So I know it's a two-edged sword.
Yeah, so that'll be, it's a shame that there's not a lot of home runs anymore. It seems like MLB is mainly all about pitchers. But, hopefully the game will be more fun for audiences. All right, well, Steve and I, we're going to come back on our next segment and wrap up the show and talk to you about what's coming up this week on Ole Miss Sports. Has this been fun, Steve?
This has been a blast. Thank you for asking me to come on.
All right, well, we'll be right back to wrap up Hotty Toddy Hotline.
Because you want more flavor, at Nuke's we marinate and grill to perfection. Because you want the latest culinary tastes and trends, we never rest. At Nuke's, great food drives us. So we are meticulous in our preparation, obsessed with the quality of our ingredients, and uncompromising about serving you our very best. We believe that sharing a memorable meal is one of life's ultimate pleasures. Join us at Nuke's Eatery.
Welcome back into Hotty Toddy Hotline with Steve Vassallo from HottyToddy.com. We're at the Hampton Inn, 112 Heritage Drive. What do you think of this beautiful property?
Well, I like all of Chan Patel's properties. Chan has a number of hotels here in Oxford, and they all are great assets to our community. And Chan is one of the biggest Ole Miss athletic fans that I know of. He doesn't miss a game hardly ever. So it's wonderful to be here in his lobby in one of the hotels here talking about Ole Miss sports. Also,
Holiday Inn Express right next door, 662-236-2500. You can call them. And, of course, the newest property is the Town Place Suites over by the Oxford Conference Center at 105 Ed Perry Boulevard. Call them 662-238-3522. If you're in town for a weekend at Swayze or a trip to the Pavilion, please call them. They are a great hotel. And, of course, the other Hampton Inn in Oxford located at 662-234-5535. Call them at 103 Ed Perry Boulevard. Charter Road Hospitality. Just great hotels, and we're happy to broadcast from these properties each and every week. All right, coming up this week in Ole Miss sports, we mentioned on Tuesday the Ole Miss basketball team goes at A&M, and then coming up on Saturday, the Ole Miss basketball team travels at Auburn. Tip-off for the A&M games at 8 p.m. Central Time. That one will be broadcast by ESPNU, and then the Auburn game will be broadcast by the SEC Network. Women's basketball they're really struggling this year, 10-14, 2-9 in the conference. They're in action this week on Thursday as they'll travel to Tennessee Knoxville, take on the Volunteers. That one 6 o'clock on SEC Network. Plus, of course, baseball. Like we mentioned earlier, their 3-game series against Florida International starts this Friday as they'll play the Panthers at 4 o'clock. Saturday's game will be at 1:30, and Sunday's game will be at noon. Now, Ole Miss tennis. Let's get to them really quickly. Ole Miss tennis team, they are a really great team, and I honestly I think out of all the Ole Miss sports, they're the most underrated sport here.
Without a doubt. I've been to many tennis matches over the last 5 years, and that's one of the best, most enjoyable sports to watch, and not enough people take advantage of it. But we've got great tennis teams here, and it's just another thing to do in the spring if you're an Ole Miss fan.
And the Rebels are ranked 20th in the country. Over the weekend, they got a big win over number 4 Baylor, and it was, to beat a top 5 team, that's exceptional. They're actually Baylor is the toughest team that Ole Miss had on their schedule, so that was big that they were able to beat them early in the season, Steve. And then of course we'll get to Ole Miss softball. That will pick up a little bit later as they are in action this Friday as they travel to McNeese State and Troy, Alabama to take on McNeese, and then also they have a doubleheader that day against Troy. They just got to go to Hawaii, Honolulu. I mean that's so cool.
It's a nice perk. It's a good reason to play softball.
Yeah, they in Hawaii the team went 4-1 and only had one loss, and that was against the University of Hawaii. They lost that one 3-0, but Ole Miss returns to Mississippi 4-1 on the season, and their first home game is not till February 26th against Northern Iowa. So we have a little while before you can see them play at home, but that they are playing Troy, Alabama in Troy this next weekend, and then on the 24th they'll have a doubleheader in Hattiesburg against Southern Miss. All right, Steve. So final thoughts on Ole Miss sports.
Well, I think Ole Miss sports, the state of the union right now could not be better. Looking at football, the great way our basketball team is closing, optimistic outlook for all of our spring sports, men's baseball, softball, and tennis. They're all looking up. So we've got a lot to look forward to. Unfortunately, I think there's not going to be a spring football game this year because of the turf issue. But other than that, it's going to be a great spring here in Oxford.
Well, Steve, it was great to have you on the show this week,
Thank you.
And we will talk to you down the road.
All right, Browning, hang in there, my man.
All right, for our executive producer, John Rawl, you've been listening to Hotty Toddy Hotline, a production of CRM Sports on the Colonel Ref Radio Network. We'll see you next week.